Well, a warm welcome to this talk, Sunday the 25th of August. Now, today's video is about safe food and unsafe food and food which is essentially toxic in some circumstances. This is not a political channel, but we do feel free to have the views of politicians on if it impacts on our health. So we're looking for safe food. We need to end the chronic disease epidemic, stroke pandemic, because this is in the United States, Canada, Europe, all over the place. We've got too much obesity. We've got too much diabetes mellitus, especially type 2. We've got too much hypertension, too many preventable cancers, all sorts of mental illness, all sorts of behavioural problems in children. And we need to address this, and a big step forward in this would be ensuring safe food. Let's get some of the views of Mr. Robert Kennedy Jr. on this now.
Key issues, and that includes the American diet and what's in our food.
I also want to salute Bobby's decades of work as an advocate for the health of our families and our children. Nobody's done more.
We talked about, not about the things that separate us because we don't agree on everything, but on the values and the issues that bind us together. And one of the issues that he talked about was having safe food and ending the chronic disease epidemic. And don't you want a president that's going to make America healthy again?
One of the things about common sense, of course, is it is very rare. It is not at all common. But of course, we want to optimise the health of a country. And what would actually be nice as well, just quick word to Mr. Kennedy, if he gets the United States sorted out, maybe he could come and help us in this country as well. Let's listen to some specifics now that he wants to talk about.
I thought it'd be great to just kind of look at some of these items because parents are encountering these food items in grocery stores everywhere. Maybe we could just start right here with seed oils. We're hearing a lot about seed oils. Why should people be worried about these kind of products?
Seed oils are one of the most unhealthy ingredients that we have in foods. And seed oils, the reason they're in the foods is because they're heavily subsidized. They're very, very cheap, but they are associated with all kinds of very, very serious illnesses, including body-wide inflammation.
Right.
Which affects all of our health. It's one of the worst things you can eat, and it's almost impossible to avoid. If you eat any processed food, you're going to be eating seed oil.
Right, and it's interesting, the government subsidizes it. Why would the government want to subsidize something that's going to make people sick? And then in the end, we all end up paying for that in terms of healthcare costs, which are skyrocketing.
Yeah, because that is a direct result of corruption. About 75% of FDA's budget comes from regulated industry, and that means food processors and pharmaceutical industry. All of them profit from a sick population.
Did he say corruption then? Well, imagine that. He seems to think there's corruption in the system. Whatever next. Now, the seed oils, these are sometimes called vegetable oils, but he's right in calling them seed oils, not vegetable oil. So sunflower oil, soybean oil, canola oil, maize oil, corn oil, palm kernel oil, peanut oil. The problem is with all these is that they're produced at a very high temperature. Now, I don't do product placements. I just went down to my kitchen and I got a few things out. So this is avocado oil, which I use when I can afford it. It is quite expensive, but it's cold pressed. And the good thing about that is you can use it for very high temperature cooking. I also, for higher temperature cooking, use rapeseed oil, not because it's rapeseed oil, but again, because it's cold pressed. So it's not had the high temperature processing. And of course, perhaps the best one you can eat is, and again, this is not a product placement, this is just one I had in my cupboard, is extra virgin olive oil, which is remarkably good for you for many reasons. And you can cook with this, but if you can eat it raw, it's even better. Many other examples as well. Let's go on now. Mr. Kennedy, I think next is going to talk about food colourings.
You know, a big item that, and by the way, it's getting very expensive, are cereals. Why is the food coloring in particular bad?
Food coloring, you see here yellow food coloring, that is a petroleum product. Mm-hmm. It's associated with really, with depression. It's associated with autoimmune injuries and ADHD. Yeah. And red dye also is very bad. In Europe, these same companies are producing the same products, but they're using natural coloring. But here they can get away with it. We have about almost 1,000 chemicals that are in our food that are either outright banned in Europe or actively discouraged. So you wouldn't be able to buy this kind of stuff in Europe. You ask about why it's so cheap, why it's so ubiquitous. It's because we subsidize the worst foods. We subsidize it with about 70% of our food stamp program is to process foods, which are all poison.
Well, I can't say I fancy eating petroleum products. That sounds a bit like petrol. These things are associated with a lot of psychiatric disorders, he's saying, depression, autoimmune injuries as well, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which of course is common in children. Red dye is also very bad. Now, he talks about 1,000 chemicals used in the United States in foods. That is appalling. Now, he says that a lot of these things aren't allowed in Europe, and that is true, but we have significant scope for improvement in Europe as well. We eat far too many ultra-processed foods. We need to eat more natural foods and get rid of this ultra-processing that's causing, or a massive factor, perhaps I would think the main factor in contributing to this pandemic of largely preventable, nearly all preventable chronic disease that is burdening our countries. Next, I think he talks about natural flavours. Let's see just how natural flavours are.
Right. One of the things that's interesting is you'll see on labels natural flavors, which is this catch-all phrase that I guess was lobbied for, but the ingredients in natural flavors are not really natural.
No. In our country, natural flavors are chemical products. So you can't trust what's on the ingredient label, and the reason for that, again, is government corruption. It's that the agency, the USDA, the FDA, have been captured by the industries they're supposed to regulate. And they all have an interest in subsidies and then in mass poisoning the American public.
Did he say corruption again then? I think he did actually. It's almost as if he's thinking that vested interest in large-scale manufacturing and food production and control is not that concerned with our personal health. Dear me. Did he say mass poisoning? Absolutely incredible what he's talking about here. And this is not just Mr. Kennedy thinking this. Many others think the same thing, of course. The last one he talks about is pesticides. Let's hope they haven't been captured as well.
I want to talk about pesticides, and then let's talk about the policy. So let's talk about the pesticides and the things that worry you about. I mean, this looks like fresh food, right? What should I be worried about here?
Yeah, I mean, the irony is, like, for example, my wife loves kale, and she had the impression that kale is actually good for you. If it's organic, it's very good for you. But most kale and strawberries, for example, grapes, are contaminated with pesticides, and particularly the Environmental Working Group has found what they call the dirty dozen, some of the worst pesticides on these products. So, I look at a strawberry and I think, oh, this is a healthy food. Right. But in most cases, unless it's organic, certified organic, you are getting something that's actually hurting you.
See, the thing about pesticides is you can't see them and you can't taste them. You've got a food that looks really healthy and fresh, crisp and crunchy. You know, maybe mum goes to the supermarket and buys some for toddler to eat on the way home. But it can be contaminated with pesticides put on to kill various bugs to optimise the production process, to optimise profits and to optimise the amount of food that's produced, not necessarily the quality of food that's produced. Now, I don't like the sound of that dirty dozen at all. I don't want to eat any of those dirty dozen. I don't know about you. The last thing that's talked about is what can change, because this system needs to change. This is a massive problem. We need to do something about it on both sides of the pond. Let's hear his suggestions for that, then we'll close.
What can be done at a government level to stop this and make people get healthy?
As president, I'll issue an executive order on day one that anybody who is recommending food products in USDA or FDA at any of those committees, if you are going to be on those committees, you have to have no conflict of interest. We spend 5 times our military budget on chronic disease.
Yeah.
And it's made us the sickest population in the world. And if you wonder why we're the sickest people in the world, why do we have these epidemics of ADHD and depression and all these kind of psychiatric illnesses that have been linked by the science to these kind of foods, to the ingredients of these foods? And why do we have these neurological disorders, all this epidemic of autoimmune disease?
So many of these products are geared towards children, which I think is what's really tragic about it. It's sort of like you're putting them at a very early age on this pathway to chronic disease. And then at the end of that is pharma to sort of cure whatever the food did to you.
The advisors who actually choose the nutrition guidelines are almost all of corrupted. They're conflicted.
Are you willing to take on a position like this in the Trump administration as health czar?
Well, one way or the other, I'm going to be fighting to get this stuff out of our food. I mean, we're poisoned. We have a generation of kids that are swimming around in a toxic soup right now. And we need to, we're betraying them. We're supposed to be taking care of our kids, and we're letting these industries corrupt our agencies and mass poison them. And, nobody in the world has a chronic disease epidemic of the kind that we have in this country.
No, it's true. I think it's a sleeper issue of this election. So I really appreciate you coming on, explaining this, breaking it down, and laying out your policies.
Rachel, thanks for having me, and thanks for paying attention to this. I think I know that it's difficult in your position to go up against powerful industries. I'm glad you're telling the truth.
Why on earth wouldn't you want regulatory bodies which do not have a conflict of interest? It's the duty of adults to look after children. This is what we do as adults. We care for those weaker than ourselves. We look after children. And at the moment, according to Mr. Kennedy, they're swimming around in a toxic soup, which doesn't sound good at all. Let's get the ethics back into this. Let's start putting people first, rather than profit for big industries first. But there's a bright side to this. Never mind. All these clever pharmaceutical people will probably come up with pills that can treat all these things that these toxic foods are causing. There must be a pill for every ill after all. Or is there? Should we not be optimising our lifestyles? And a big part of that is getting food right, putting food in front of people that is safe and nutritious, not unsafe and toxic. We want things that are safe and effective. I've heard that phrase before somewhere. Can't quite think where. But for now, thank you for watching.